Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight.
Bahamians gather in Rawson Square to voice their concerns about WTO.
The son of an American businessman killed on the island of Bimini is speaking out.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Joaquin. Topping news tonight, big changes coming to the water sports industry. Transport Minister Renwood Wells today putting those in that industry on high alert as stricter regulations on licensing as well as tougher fines are on the way.
Mr. Speaker, Clause 10 creates offenses by the owner of a craft who operates or lets for hire an unregistered or unlicensed craft or who lets for hire a craft to an unlicensed operator. An individual who commits such an offense is liable to summary conviction of a penalty not exceeding $5,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years or to both such fine and imprisonment.
It's an industry that has been under the microscope, especially by the U.S. Embassy, with repeated warnings to U.S. citizens visiting the Bahamas about jet ski operators and others in the industry. And now the Minutes administration is seeking to clamp down. In leading debate on the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Amendment Bill and the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Amendment Bill, Wells spoke to the increase in fines as well as the possibility of conviction, like in this instance.
Mr. Speaker, the fine in Section 9 will be increased from the mere $75 it currently is to some $2,000.
The changes also place certain powers within the hands of the Minister of Transport, where he or she would have the power to limit the amount of watercrafts a company is allowed to have registered. The Commercial Recreational Watercraft Amendment Bill in particular speaks to the need for those in the industry to have insurance in the event an incident occurs where a patron is injured.
A certified copy of a valid insurance certificate. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, this bill speaks to the fact that in the event that a mishap occurs, the owner would be covered by insurance. And we've had issues in the industry where that was not the case.
Wells pointed to stats by the Royal Bahamas Police Force that showed that there were 43 incidents last year where tourists were the victims, 30 of which being U.S. nationals. Tourism Minister Denicio de Aguilar said with tourism being the country's #1 industry, changes to laws and regulations like this are needed to protect the country's cash cow.
We need to ensure that this industry is properly regulated. The sufficient oversight is provided to it. Because if, Mr. Speaker, we don't get this right, this could affect the goose that is laying the golden egg. Tourism is critical to our economy. Employs 2/3 of our workforce, generates a vast portion of our GDP. If we don't get this right, we are going to affect the goose that is laying the golden egg.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs calling for a peaceful resolution to the unrest in Venezuela. This as opposition leader Juan Guaido calls for more demonstrations and the removal of President Nicolas Maduro. In a statement, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the government of the Bahamas expresses the hope that a peaceful resolution is realized in accordance with resolutions adopted by the Organization of American States and the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which all member states have accepted. Dozens have died in Venezuela and relief from outward sources have been denied since protests began. In other news, dozens braved the rainy weather in Rawson Square this morning to voice their concerns about the Bahamas' accession to the World Trade Organization and the recently passed Immigration Amendment Bill. Georgia Bain reports.
Several members of the group Bahamians Against WTO gathered in Rawson Square just after 9 Wednesday morning to stand their ground that WTO is not for Bahamians.
We say no to WTO! We say no to the immigration bill! Take that in your phone! No to the WTO! We say no to the immigration bill!
Scores of Bahamians representing a group called Bahamians Against WTO stood in solidarity as they chanted, "We say no to WTO, we say no to the immigration bill," as members of Parliament entered the House of Assembly for the morning session. Group member Paul Moss said the decision to join WTO should be made by Bahamians.
We believe that this is so fundamental that it ought to come to the Bahamian public to make a vote. It is not right for the government to take it upon themselves to try to bring a whole nation into this regime that we know is absolutely flawed. It has problems. It cannot be that we could just simply go into it and allow what has been happening to come on this country. We believe that jobs ought to be for Bahamians first. They ought to be protected, and that is why we are here this morning.
Another group member, Paul Roll, said the government needs to slow down and think about Bahamians before making decisions that could leave them in a vulnerable state.
Free movement of people. People could come here as they feel. We got 170 nations. Some of these countries have 100 million or more. In 5 years, if this goes through, we could have 5 million people here competing for your job. Blue hair and blonde eyes. I believe Mr. Brent Simnett have an agenda to run the country instead of just land. I like him, but what you're doing is wrong. And I view the F&M government as no longer government. Anytime a government is not run like a government and listen to the people, it's a regime. It's happening in Venezuela.
Speaking out on behalf of the fishing, catering, and law industry, Paul Melis says that he sees through the guise of the accession to WTO and the proposed changes to the immigration bill.
With this immigration bill, we want to open up to allow people to come in here, no background check, no verification, work 2 weeks on a boat, go home, bam, done. And now, my mother, she's a caterer. And now any event planner is going to come in here as under the guise of attending a consulting meeting. And how long does it take to do a catering? It takes 2 days to do a catering. And now they have 2 weeks here? What about law? How many legal cases, how many legal consulting cases can be done in 2 weeks? My family owns a law firm. They get some cases done in a day. And now you want 2 weeks of these people? This is unbelievable.
According to Melis, it's a threat to Bahamian sovereignty.
Not only is the WTO a threat to Bahamian sovereignty, because now rich corporations are going to be able to come into here and they can use their 100, 200 lawyer teams and sue our government to the gunnels because they are losing profits anytime our government tries to install a policy that's going to hurt their bottom line. And we have to reduce our standards in order to accommodate their profits.
According to Roll, if the government goes through with the accession to WTO, they must go.
If this bill passed, we asking for the F&M government to leave the country. Get out. We don't need you here. We got enough intelligent individuals who could run this country. Your time is up.
Reporting for our news, I'm Georgia Bain.
All right, thanks, Georgia. Well, officers of the Road Traffic Department beefing up their presence on the streets of New Providence. With more on this, here's Jillian Gray.
Despite the numbers for traffic fatalities rivaling that of the murder count, Chief Superintendent Craig Stubbs said there has still been a decrease in traffic accidents when compared to 2018.
Despite the last month's stats on fatalities, we are still in a decline based on last year's terms of fatalities. There's a decline. The numbers have decreased the same period as last year.
The traffic fatalities for 2018 totaled 69. Nearly half of that number represented pedestrians that were struck and killed. In the first quarter of 2019, there were 23 traffic fatalities and 23 murders. To help curb those stifling numbers, the government passed the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, which bans the use of cell phones while driving and also driving with an open alcoholic beverage. Dealing with the problem, Stubbs said, will take both education and enforcement.
Education is the key. We have to continue to educate and inform them of various aspects of driving initiatives or infractions. Enforcement will be also one initiative that we will be looking at.
Stubbs said traffic officers are on the road every day, ramping up their efforts to ensure drivers obey road traffic laws.
We have ticketed some 30,000 plus offenders for breach of the Road Traffic Act. We have ticketed over some 500 plus persons for driving in excess of the speed limit. And in doing so, we know that there's a category of young offenders between that 18 and I'll say 35 who we see as repeated offenders in driving in excess of the speed limit.
He added that officers will continue their aggressive campaign to reduce the amount of traffic fatalities and accidents, as those tragedies often leave families broken.
As we know, the amount of accidents has impacted family members, has impacted our healthcare, has impacted many agencies as relates to families losing loved ones or persons still have disabilities as a result of road traffic accidents.
Reporting for our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
The son of an American man who was killed in Bimini over the weekend is speaking out. Jose Perez told a Florida news team he spent $100,000 in an unsuccessful bid to have his father airlifted to the U.S. for medical treatment. Jared Higgs has the story.
47-year-old Alian Perez was shot multiple times after returning home from the restaurant he owns in Allentown, Bimini. His son telling NBC6 South Florida that it is the hours after the attack that haunt him.
As long as I can remember, we've been doing charity funds for all the kids in the island.
Alian Perez's son, Jose Perez, remembering his father as a giving man who loved the island of Bimini. That's where he ran his restaurant, Bimini Big John's. According to police, in the moments after he was shot, Perez was able to provide officers with the details of the attack. He says he heard somebody at his door, and when he answered, the assailant shot him multiple times. He was also able to call his girlfriend, Daenerys Sanchez, who was in South Florida at the time.
When I took the call, he was on the floor, said Perez's girlfriend. She said he was full of blood and asked her while in South Florida to call somebody in Bimini for help.
Perez's son says despite the fact that Bimini and Miami are only separated by 50 miles, they weren't able to get his dad to South Florida for treatment.
There's a lot of things that we were doing, a lot of people that was over there that were helping, trying to do everything possible to get him out of the island.
Jose Perez even claimed that they spent $100,000 in an effort to have his father airlifted. They also had a plan B that involved the Coast Guard picking up the 47-year-old from a boat a few miles offshore.
Coast Guard said if you could get him on a boat, take him out 5-6 miles out, we'll be able to pick him up.
However, that didn't work either.
The police over there, they were not allowing that. They were saying that they had orders that until, they gave the okay, they were not going to release him.
A family friend of Perez, a father of 3, slammed Bimini's healthcare facilities as inadequate, saying he has seen better equipped veterinary clinics in the United States. This prompted a response from Health Minister Dr. Dwayne Sands, who says a consultant physician trained in treating life-threatening injuries attended to Perez for nearly 2 hours before his death. Meanwhile, police on Bimini say they don't have a motive for the killing and are on the hunt for suspects. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jared Higgs.
Carnival Corporation is defending itself against revelations that it dumped nearly 500,000 gallons of treated sewage in Bahamian waters during 2017. A statement released this afternoon by the company's Senior Vice President of Global Port and Global Destination Development, Giora Israel, said concern over recent headlines regarding its 2017 dumping have understandably led to expressions of concern. Israel added that all cases were self-identified and self-reported and followed established and accepted reporting protocol. The statement went on to say that all discharges from Carnival Corporation ships were fully treated prior to release, posing no threat or harm to the marine environment based on independent studies. The company's senior vice president also noted that since the end of 2017, there has only been one instance of improper discharge, which was self-identified and self-reported. Well, tourist arrivals are up, according to Tourism Minister Dionisi Diagler. In Parliament today, the minister said after seeing the highest arrival numbers ever in the country in 2018, he didn't think it could get any better.
The first 2 months of 2019, the tourism arrivals were up a whopping 16.6% for the first 2 months. That was all of our visitors. And the stopover visitor component, I keep emphasizing the stopover visitor component. For the first 2 months of 2019, while I had initially projected it would be about 12-15%, I was wrong. It was up 23.7% in the first 2 months of 2019.
The Bahamas had over 6.6 million visitors last year. Diagler said at the rate things are going, he sees that number ballooning to over 7 million for 2019. He said the improvement has had a trickle-down effect to every island.
On the island of New Providence, the stopover visitors were up 28%. Even on the island of Grand Bahama, they were up 8%. Abaco was up 15.8%. Exuma, you could feel some too. You were up 23.2% in the first 2 months of 2019. Eleuthera, where the Eleuthera boys going? The Eleuthera was up 27.3%, and San Salvador was up 9.2%. Every island, all of them, have an incredible growth.
Still to come, a call for more resources to help at-risk youth. Plus, Alive launches a road safety campaign. Stay tuned.